Alright, silent tier list. Recently, I climbed the Ascensions with the silent, became the best Slay the Spire silent player ever. Now I'm making a tier list. Just remember, if you disagree, you're wrong. And this tier list is law. So, accuracy. Very solid card. Shiv decks nearly almost always take one because it just does more damage. Also, this tier list is a bit of an old one, so some of these cards are old versions. Accuracy has since been buffed to make shivs deal 4 damage instead of 3, which makes this card significantly better than it used to be. But shiv decks almost always want one because they make your shivs, which is the core mechanic of the deck, do more damage. The real question is whether you want 2 of them, which could vary. But if you're spamming a lot of shivs, you want one. One other important thing this card does is that it makes your shivs do more damage than your strikes, which can single-handedly enable cards like Storm of Steel, which otherwise without an accuracy is not that good. But with an accuracy, it can be okay. Next we have Acrobatics. Acrobatics is it's a very good card late game. Early game, I would not advise picking one of these up because early game, what are you drawing to? Early game, you're going to draw 3, discard 1. What, you're going to draw into all your strikes and defends? Spend an energy? It's good if you can, if you have enough energy to play all your cards. Acrobatics can do wonders for you. Can get you a big hand. Can also, once again, enable things like Storm of Steel, but also calculated gambles can go off for more. And then you can cycle through your deck really fast. If you have relics that rely on you shuffling your deck, Acrobatics can help you get there. Overall, great draw card, just not something you want to pick up early game. Adrenaline. There is, besides maybe Time Eater and the Hex guy, I can't remember his name right now, the Hex Master thing that gives you a dazed every time you play non-attack. There are very few reasons not to take an Adrenaline, right? Because it just replaces itself and draws. It's a +1 draw and a free energy. The only time you're not taking an Adrenaline is when it's offered up alongside a better rare card that you want. Otherwise, you're almost always taking it. And even then, you will sometimes pick this over other better rare cards because it's a pure net positive. There are very few circumstances in which you're unhappy to see Adrenaline. Next, we got Afterimage. Very, very good card. Once again, for Shiv decks or decks that like to spam a lot. It's not better than Acrobatics, but it's very solid. It really feels like if you want to just rely on Afterimage for your block, it does really feel like you need 2 of them. Just one might not be enough. You might need to play some other block cards in there. But if you're playing a lot of cards, like Shivs, this can do you wonders. It can single-handedly be your block plan. It also negates Beat of Death from the heart. And if you have 2, it will allow you to still block for 1 against the heart. Notably, because of the heart, this card is a little mitigated, but it also becomes more necessary because of the heart. So, Afterimage is a great card. Its upgrade makes it innate, which sometimes it can feel really good if you desperately need that block and have no other block cards. But if you have a few other block cards, the upgrade isn't always worth it because it's not actually increasing the performance of the card. It's just making it appear in your opening hand. Alchemize. Super, super good card. I don't think it's quite S tier, but we'll see what else pops up in the list, and if it does, then it maybe can move up to S tier. Alchemize says obtain a random potion, and it will let you start playing potions like crazy, at least 1 every combat if you're consistently playing it. Upgraded for 0, which is really nice because then you can just play it and not have to think about the energy. Although a potion for 1 energy is still really good. If you have any synergy like Sacred Bark or a Potion Belt, this can be great. If you have Potion Belt, you can just save up potions and then spam them all on one boss. Great card. Only time you really don't take it is when, like I said, without Adrenaline, there's a better rare card offered up next to it. Otherwise, most of the time, it's safe to just pick up an Alchemize, upgrade it later. If it's upgraded, which if you find an Alchemize upgraded, now there's really like no reason at all not to take it because it's better value for one energy than most other cards will. There's probably some decks, but I've very rarely seen Alchemize and go, no, I don't want that, unless it's being offered up next to a card that I really need for my deck. All Out Attack. All Out Attack is, it's okay AoE. Well, it's actually is fairly decent AoE, but the discard one at random, it's just not quite it. For decks that want to be discarding a lot of cards, they really want to choose what cards they discard. You want to discard your Tacticians, your Reflexes, or a card you don't need. It really sucks if you have to play this early in the turn and then discard the card that you need. It is a fairly good Act 1 take because it can help you deal with things like Slime Boss if you're going up against that, Slime Gang or Sentries, really anything that you need to fight early. Early Act 1, there's no problem with just taking this off out of the gate, although it does get significantly worse as the game progresses. 1,000 Cuts. It looks really flashy, and it looks flashy, it looks really good, but unfortunately it's not that good. Whenever you play a card deal 1 damage to all enemies, sounds really good. It does. It sounds flashy. I really like this card. I thought it was busted when I first started playing the Silent. It's really not. 2 mana, 2 energy, really doesn't justify the effect here. Upgraded says deal 2 damage to all enemies. You really need that upgrade, and even then, you would rather for that 2 energy, you can do more damage likely with that 2 energy than you could if you played 1,000 Cuts and then, played a bunch of cards afterwards. If you're really, really cycling shivs, it can work. But most of the time, if you don't have a really, really good shiv deck going, there's better things you can do with 2 energy, and a lot of the time, you'll draw this in your hand, you'll look at the enemies, see they're attacking for a ton, you need to block, and then you don't get to play your 1,000 Cuts, and you wish you would have just drawn something else. And for that, top of C tier. Backflip. A very standard card. I find this is a much easier Act 1 take than something like Acrobatics. Late game, it's a little worse than Acrobatics, because Acrobatics with the discard synergy and more draw. But early game, it's much easier to take because of that block. It feels like you're just playing a defend at worst, which is justifiable early game. Late game, it can still be okay, can still get you through your deck, but it's just not as versatile as something like Acrobatics late game. Backstab. Another early game take, solid. The damage at the start is nice, and it can help you clear out a lot of fights. There's actually are some really cool decks where they take a couple backstabs and kill everything really fast, and the entire rest of the deck is just devoted to killing bosses because nothing else can survive the first turn or two. But otherwise, late game, you're kind of wishing you had drawn something else in your opening hand instead of this. However, it can be alright if you're running a Shiv deck and you have the Wristblade Relic, which makes all your 0-cost attacks do more. Even then, you would still sometimes like to draw another card. But early game, it's not a bad idea at all. It's a very, very good idea early game, actually. If you see this on floor 1 or 2, you should probably take it, because it will help you deal with the front-loaded damage race that is Act 1. Bane. Bane's a controversial card. I've gone from loving this card to hating this card several times, and I'm kind of in the middle of it right now. It really, really wants the upgrade. Deal 7 if the enemy has poison. Deal 7 again. Upgrade that's 10 and 10. It's alright, but the big problem with it being a poison-based card is that it doesn't apply poison. And you really want in a poison deck to apply poison because your main win condition is something like Catalyst, and this does not work with Catalyst, right? It just does damage. And early game, fine pick. You just want to apply some poison, deal damage. The boss is Hexaghost or Guardian. A poison deck's going to work fine. Sure. Get some more damage. Late game, would not recommend it. Because, like I said, it doesn't apply poison, doesn't work with Catalyst. Most of the time, you can do more with one energy. Blade Dance. Blade Dance is a very good card. Very, very good card. This card has since been changed. It adds 3 shivs to your hand instead of 2, like it says in the picture here. Upgraded adds 4. The upgrade isn't that necessary, in my opinion. There's other cards, like I would upgrade my accuracy over my Blade Dance if I had both. Because upgraded Blade Dance, despite that, will actually do more damage if you have an accuracy. If you just have a Blade Dance and an accuracy and you upgrade your Blade Dance. But if you upgrade your accuracy first, if you find more Shiv cards, then those are better. Instead of just upgrading your Blade Dance, then you find another Shiv card, and then you're just in the cycle of upgrading your next Shiv card when you could have just upgraded your accuracy and had them all do more damage. But otherwise, no, very good card. Very good for proccing relics like Shuriken or Kunai, and just the best card, single-handedly, in my opinion, for creating shivs and just dealing them out. Blur. Blur is a fantastic card. Fantastic fucking card. Not as good as Adrenaline because it's not an always take, but not removing your block at the start of your next turn is just insane. Blur enables so much manipulation. Like, oh no, I drew a Hand of Defense, but it has Blur in it on a turn when the enemy's not attacking. Great, you can block for next turn. Saving your block, you can overblock. There's so many situations where I wish I had a Blur because I can overblock for a ton, but don't have as many offensive cards in my hand and want to save some of that for next turn. If you can get Burst on this thing, Blur is even crazier. You can start what I call the Blurricade, because Barricade on the Ironclad, and yeah, you get it, you're smart. You can then just keep on stacking the Blur, get multiple Blur effects, and never lose block. It's a little tough, but it's doable. And it will make your game plan defensively so much stronger. It's one of the main silent block plans. Like I said, Afterimage can be your block plan. Blur and a couple other block cards can also be your block plan. And I love it for that. Bouncing Flask. Bouncing Flask is the highest like poison per energy card. Or no, sorry. It applies the most poison on any other card. It really struggles in multi-target fights because you don't know where the poison's going to go. You would like the poison, ideally, to just hit the same target and just rack up a ton of poison and then either multiply it with Catalyst or just add more with stuff like Deadly Poison. It would be much, much better if it just said apply 9 poison. But it's not. And it's still good in poison decks. I really like Bouncing Flask in a Snecko Eye deck, because obviously it costs 2. 2-cost cards always feel a little clunky normally, but this card is good enough against single targets that it deserves to still be up at top of B tier. Well, arguably Backflip might be a little better, but I'll keep it at the top of B tier. If you upgrade, it says apply 3 poison to a random enemy 4 times, 12 poison for 2 energy. A very, very good bargain. Bullet Time. Bullet Time is one of those cards that you read when you're new to the game, and I'll put it back down here for now. But you read at the beginning of the game and you think, that is the most busted thing I've ever seen. And it is good. It's just not as good as you think it is. It says you cannot draw additional cards this turn. Reduce the cost of all cards in your hand to 0 this turn. It's good, but what it really wants to really shine is either you want to draw it in a big hand, so cards that can then draw you a lot of cards first. If you have 4 energy, this card's much better, because then you can play something like a backflip or an acrobatics, get a bigger hand, and then play your bullet time. If you have the hovering kite relic to discard, much better, because then you can play your acrobatics, discard, get the energy back, then play bullet time. If you have runic pyramid to retain your hand, much better, because then you can get a big hand and then just play bullet time, play all of it. If you have what's the other, Snecko Eye, it's great, because then obviously it's a 3-cost card. It's going to be great with Snecko Eye, and then you can also play that big hand with the extra draw you get from Snecko Eye. But by itself, it's only okay. By itself, it would be like bottom of B tier-ish, but because of all those synergies, it's got to go up here, somewhere in A tier. I wouldn't put it higher than cards like Accuracy or Afterimage, because they really enable some decks, because Bullet Time by itself, without any draw, is just meh. But if you get draw, actually no, this card does deserve to be above some of the other cards. Not above Acro, but it does deserve to be above these. It lets you play a full hand for 3 energy. Not being able to draw additional cards this turn kind of sucks, but if you have a draw, you can get a big hand and play all those cards anyways. Very solid. Burst. Burst is an incredible card. Burst says this turn your next skill is played twice. Upgrade, it says your next 2 skills. Unupgraded, it's okay. If you draw, it can just basically take the form of any other skill in your hand and upgrade it. Upgraded, now we're getting to some serious value here. Now, it is giving you much, much, much more value for the energy. Like I mentioned earlier, it can do some fantastic things with blur. I mean, just look at some skills here and tell me what it wouldn't be good. I mean, there's some stuff it wouldn't be very good with, but obviously it'd be fine with Adrenaline if you want to get that big hand. If it's upgrade, you could do Adrenaline and you could just do stuff to draw a bunch of cards, play a bullet time. Not with the burst affecting the bullet time, but there are so many things. Just playing next skills twice is so valuable, because it's just such, you save so much energy. There's just so many things you can do with this. I mean, if you like Echo Form on the defect, right? If you're a big Echo Form fan, this is better than Echo Form, because it doesn't cost as much energy, it's much more versatile, and it lets you play 2 cards for it. You might say, well, Echo Form lets me play all the other cards for the rest of the combat. Yeah, but this only costs 1. What, a combat's lasting maybe 3-4 turns max? If it's an elite, 5. If it's a boss, maybe it'll last longer than that. But you're going to get to play Burst multiple times. The way I see it, it's way more skills played per energy than Echo Form will be. Calculated Gamble. Calculated Gamble is a very, very good card. It should go up here. It's not one of those cards where you're like, oh, I wish I would have drawn something else instead of this Calculated Gamble. That's why I wish I hadn't taken it, because it reshuffles your entire hand. Great for activating those relics that activate off shuffling your draw pile. Great with acrobatics or any other draw, because then you can look at more cards with Calculated Gamble. Great with any discard synergies. Cards like Eviscerate become free after like basically 1 play of this. Great card. Lets you see more cards in your deck. What more could you ask for? Caltrops. Caltrops feels awkward. The problem with Caltrops is that it doesn't synergize with anything else, right? It doesn't scale with your strength. It doesn't play cards. It doesn't synergize with accuracy or blade dance or any of these other cards that are win conditions. It's not poison. It just kind of does its own thing. It can be good against the heart, yes, for the big multi attacks that it does. But if an enemy isn't doing big multi attacks, that 3 damage for 1 energy, if they're hitting you for single attacks, that's just not worth it. It's just not the value you need. If you're going into the heart fight and it's there in the shop, you could consider it. If there's other things you really need to do with your energy, even then, it might not be worth it. Catalyst. Put that shit up in top of S tier. Holy moly, is Catalyst good. Catalyst is incredible. Double the enemy's poison. Single-handedly makes poison not just the best win condition on the silent, but one of the best win conditions of the entire game. Upgraded says triple. Oh, now we're talking. You get 2 of these things, nothing's living. Nothing's living. You're just let's say you put 20 poison on an enemy. Great job. You have 2 upgraded catalysts. Suddenly, they're taking 60 damage per turn. Oh, you put other catalysts on, they're taking 180 damage per turn. Nothing's living. Nothing's living that long. A couple poison cards, 2 catalysts, and some block, and you're done. That's a winning deck. One of the best ways to kill the heart, because it doesn't rely on as many things like shivs. It's the big downfall of shivs. They suck at killing the heart because of the beat of death. But with poison, you have none of these problems. With Catalyst, you have none of these problems. Catalyst single-handedly makes poison incredible. If you've never tried this card, please do. It's as broken as it is, as you think it is when you first read it. It's crazy. It's great. Cloak and Dagger. Gain 6 block, add 1 shift to your hand. Not as good as Blade Dance. It really doesn't do as much as you would like it to do for a Shiv card, but it's mainly a block card. It's a defensive tool for Shivs. Upgraded, it really wants an upgrade. Upgraded, it says add 2 Shivs to your hand, much better. It makes it doable. If your main way of blocking with Shivs is something like Blur, this can be a great addition to your deck. If you're using stuff like After Image, not as good. You'd rather have Blade Dances at that point. But it's good, solid defense. And then if you can upgrade it, the 2 shivs, especially with something like accuracy, don't sleep on this. It is very good. If you need the block, or it synergizes with something else. If you have something like Kunai giving you Dex, you want this in your Shiv deck. Concentrate. Concentrate's an interesting one. It's definitely hard to take. It's not a card that you're going to be taking all the time. Discard 3, gain 2 energy. 4-0 energy. It's a little hard to pull off. You might, if early game, if you take this, you're just going to be discarding your entire hand and not have anything to do. It needs extra support, which is why it's going at top of C. Now, don't get me wrong. You can take this and have it be amazing. It can be a game changer, but you just can't take it that often. It needs something like Runic Pyramid to help you retain cards. Maybe a well-laid plans to get more cards in your hand. Maybe if you have Bag of Prep, you can just draw this in your opening hand, hopefully. If you have a lot of draw, something like Acrobatics, Discard Synergy, it can work very well with. Snekowai, well actually no, it's a 0-cost card, it doesn't work with Snekowai. I was just listing off ways to draw cards. But no, it works very well with, like I said, any way to get a lot of cards in your hand. If you frequently find yourself having a lot of cards in your hand and no way to play them, Concentrate is something that you need. Not even all discard decks want to take this because sometimes the discard decks don't actually draw enough. So then this would be something you wouldn't be interested in. But it can be very good. But because you can't take it all the time, top of C. Corpse Explosion. One of the best poison cards alongside Catalyst. It's going to have to go right here. It's middle of A tier. It can trivialize some fights completely, like the Donu Deka fight. They don't even stand a chance. It basically turns all multi-target fights into single target fights because it says just get all the poison on the one dude with the most HP and then let everything else die as soon as it dies. Because poison's biggest downfall is multi-target fights, and Corpse Explosion completely solves that. Fixes that issue entirely, and for that, wonderful card. It can feel a little clunky at 2 cost, but Poison actually has enough 2 cost cards that it wouldn't feel that bad with a Snecko Eye. It would feel fine. It doesn't require it though, because the effect is good enough to the point where you don't mind it being 2 cost. Crippling Cloud. Crippling Cloud is another card like Corpse Explosion that helps Poison deal with those AoE fights. It does not do that as well as Corpse Explosion does, however. It applies weak and poison. 4 poison, 2 weak to all enemies. Upgrade, I believe it's 8 poison and 2 weak, but I'm actually not sure about that one. Don't quote me on that. But Crippling Cloud, it gets poison on everything. It applies 2 weak, but I would much rather have other defensive cards in my deck. I'd much rather have a Blur as my damage mitigation, or a Corpse Explosion to apply poison to one enemy and then kill just that one. Not always possible. You don't always see those cards. If I'm taking this, it's probably like mid-Act 2, maybe late Act 1. Not a card you can really take in the first couple floors. Overall, solidly decent card, but just not the best poison card you could find or were hoping for. Dagger Spray. I used to hate this card. I didn't think it was enough damage. Now I find myself taking it often. I end up with a Dagger Spray in my deck more than you could believe. Deal 4 damage to all enemies twice because it will carry you through those early Act 1 fights, AoE fights, and even a bunch of Act 2 things. Really falls off in Act 3, but in those Act 2 elites, especially with 2 of them being AoE fights with the Slavers and Taskmaster and the Gremlin Gang, Dagger Spray can really shine. And if you see it on early floor, most of the time, I think you should pick it up because it's just good front-loaded damage for the common damage raises in Act 1 and the many AoE fights in Act 2. Does fall off late game heavily, though. Dash. Gain 10 block, deal 10 damage. It's an alright card. Could probably go... Nah, it's a little less than alright. It can sit here in the middle of C tier. It does kind of what Iron Wave on the Ironclad does, but not as well. Because it's 2 cost. Iron Wave is more versatile, and that's why it's a better card than this. But Dash is something where I get it, and I don't feel like I'm getting the value for the energy. I feel like I could be doing so much more. And yeah, I can save you, but I would rather much have something like a Piercing Whale, which is a common card, or a Blur. I had something else to block, right? It's a defensive card that's also trying to do something offensive, but in the situation where I need defense, I would rather just have more defense instead of a little bit of defense and then a little bit of offense slapped together. If you get something like the Necronomicon, this can be much better. But other than that situation, I think it's just a very mid card. Deadly Poison. The most basic a poison card can get. It's going to comfortably sit right here in B. It just applies 5 poison for 1 energy and kind of sets the bar for where other poison cards should be balanced. Right? It deals what? Think about this. It deals 5 damage the first turn, then 4, then 3, then 2, then 1. Overall, you're looking at a total of 15 damage, but you're probably not going to get all that damage because the enemy should hopefully be dead before 5 turns. Otherwise, you're going to be taking a lot of damage. So, it's good damage. It's just delayed damage. And it stacks to their poison. There are okay, decent other ways. You know what? This actually deserves to go up a little bit. This deserves to go up right here. Because it's just a decent, good way to apply poison. This and Bouncing Flask, maybe, are 2 solid methods. But otherwise, it doesn't feel monumental. It doesn't feel incredible. But it does its job. So for that, it's a very average card. Defend. I don't even know we had these basic cards in here. I'm just going to put this at the bottom because it does not need to be ranked. Yeah, defend is, if anyone's wondering, defend and strike often just go in bottom of the barrel because every card is better than a strike and a defend. Except for maybe Clash on the Ironclad. Clash is terrible. Okay. Deflect. Deflect, very solid, 0 energy, gain 4 block. You really want to pick this up if you have some dexterity scaling. If you don't have any dexterity scaling, it's really going to feel mediocre. If you don't have a lot of draw, if you have too much energy and you can't play all the cards in your hand, it's going to feel mediocre. It's going to feel bad even. But if you have a lot of draw, if you have something like Calculated Gamble or Acrobatics, and you're cycling through your deck, it's just a bit of free block. And it just does its job. Nothing much to complain about. Can be a detriment if you don't have enough card draw, but otherwise, solid. Die, die, die. One of the 3 damage rares, like the 3 main damage rares that I consider the silent to have. It is like one of the solidly best AoE options. It's very straightforward. Deal 13 damage to all enemies. Exhaust. And it's going to go top of B tier. It doesn't scale as well as something like shivs. It benefits from strength. You know what? I don't think this card... I don't think this card's better than Bouncing Flask, but I do think it should be an A tier, so Bouncing Flask and it are going to get moved up to A tier. Yeah. That looks right. Yeah. So, Die 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 really helps in those early fights, kind of like Dagger Spray does. Really helps. As you see this in Act 1, please take it for the damage race. I mean, if anyone's wondering what I mean by, I should probably clarify what I mean by damage race. So Act 1 damage race, you really just need damage in Act 1 over defense. Because, think about it, stuff like Gremlin Knob, you just need to deal no much damage because if you block, he's going to gain strength, you're going to die. Tri-Sentries, you need to deal damage because if you block too much, they're just going to fill your deck with daze and then you die. And something like Lagavulin, you need to do damage because if you block too much, he's just going to take your strength and dexterity away, then you're going to be able to do nothing, and then you're going to die. So you really need a lot of damage in Act 1. You need some area of effect in Act 2, and that's why this is always a Act 1 to middle, maybe latter half in it, a little bit in Act 2. And if you get this in Act 3, it's kind of meh. It can be also good against the Act 4 Elite, the Spire Shield and Spire Sword for some damage against them. But otherwise, it's just straightforward damage. It's good straightforward damage at that. So, Distraction. Add a random skill to your hand to cost 0 this turn. Distraction is a card that I personally think is... I almost never take it. A random skill is so much less valuable than you might think because it just doesn't do that much, right? You could just get something that doesn't help you at all. And something like on the defect to add random power, I think it's white noise. Yeah, white noise would be much better because powers are cards that scale consistently and scale over the course of the fight, right? There's no powers that you really don't want. There are skills that you can get that you don't want to play. And a random skill just isn't as valuable as you might think. If you want, you can test it. Trust me on this one. It's just not. It's just not it. The randomness will really screw you over sometimes. Dodge and roll. This is a card that notably benefits from having dexterity a lot because it gains the dexterity benefit twice when you gain block on the first turn and when you gain block on the second turn. I think it really, really, really needs and wants that upgrade, which would make it say gain 6 block, next turn gain another 6, because that would make it better to play. It would give you more block this turn than a regular defend would, which would make it justifiable to always play it over a regular defend, and then still give you the block next turn. It's good with something like Blur, where that block can carry over multiple turns if you don't use up the block from this turn. And it's just a solid 1 energy defensive card. It really likes having dexterity. Without dexterity or without some way to just by itself, it's not as good. If dexterity wasn't a thing, it would probably be somewhere down here. But dexterity is a thing, and if you can get some dexterity going with this thing, you will be rolling. Even without, it's a fine card, but you really want something like Blur with this. Doppelganger. Doppelganger is bad without an upgrade. Without an upgrade, it's not good. With an upgrade, well, yeah. Without an upgrade, it says next turn draw X cards and gain X energy. With an upgrade, it says next turn draw X plus 1 cards and gain X plus 1 energy. It's a do something next turn card, which I and many other people I know that play this game despise because we want something now. We want something to happen now instead of next turn. Because what if those cards that you like, I'd rather play something in my hand now that's going to do something with that energy than get something that do something next turn with that energy, right? If you're really struggling on spending all your energy each turn and you say, I want to take a doppelganger because I want to be able to spend my excess energy on something next turn, you're already struggling on spending your energy. You're going to get more energy. You're not going to be able to spend it. If it's upgraded, it says draw X plus 1 cards and gain X energy. And at that point, I'm only wanting to play it for 0, which just means it's going to draw 1 card and gain 1 energy. But by having this card in my deck, I had to draw it, meaning it's drawn neutral. It just replaces itself. So all it does is say gain an energy next turn and also replace this card next turn. Not that great. And for that, something like this can go near the bottom of C tier. Endless Agony. Endless Agony, I think, is a fine early take. It says whenever you draw this card, add a copy of it into your hand, deal 4 damage. Cost 0. Upgrade, it says deal 6. And the idea behind it, that the developers kind of intended, is that you draw them and then you don't play them and then you draw them later and you get more. But I don't really want to be drawing a ton of Endless Agonies. I want to draw other stuff that I can spend my energy with. Early game, if you take 1, I often just take 1 and then play them both for a free 4 damage twice for 0 energy. And then in late game, it doesn't hurt that much to just have it in your deck. So I think it's a fine early take. But besides that, it's not doing what you want it to do. It's just damage, and you don't want to fill your hand up with these late. So I like to just take it early if I see it, get that extra damage for the damage race that is Act 1, like I've said before, and from there on just ignore it for the rest of the run. Choke. Choke's a good card. Choke's a very solid card. It really likes something that spams a lot of cards, obviously. Deal 12 damage whenever you play a card this turn. The enemy loses 3 HP. Upgraded, that's 5 HP. Really wants that upgrade. If you're playing a ton of shivs, highly recommend taking it. Because you can just start playing shivs, and that just says all your shit, not just your shivs, your defends, everything. It does 5 more damage. And it deals 12 damage by itself. Arguably a better accuracy for that turn, just for one turn. But a much better accuracy just for one turn, you can afford that. It might not scale across the entire combat, but it really scales well for this turn. You can get some big choke turns off. I've had some, and you know what, it deserves to be, I don't think it's quite A tier, but I think it deserves to be a top of B tier above stuff like Backflip and Deadly Poison. It's a very, very good card. Envenom. It says whenever an attack deals unblocked damage, apply 1 poison. I really like this art. I've always liked this art. The beta art's also really good, but the card itself is not worth the 2 cost. Think about this. Think about this. It just says do an extra 1 damage on a 1 turn time frame. It says do an extra 1 damage for every attack you play that deals unblocked attack damage. Next turn, all that damage is going to get done again, -1. Scales with poison, but the 2 cost, you can do better things with your energy for that. You can apply more poison. I can apply 10 poison with 2 deadly poisons instead of playing this and then maybe playing 1. Maybe if I'm spamming shivs, I can play 7, 8 shivs. But the 2 deadly poisons was still more poison than the Envenom was. And you might think, oh, next turn it'll do more. But you really could just do so much more if you play that 2 energy. Now, if you upgrade it, it costs 1. If you see it upgraded or you have nothing else you want to upgrade and the campfire's coming up, sure. Why not? It costs 1. I'll call it worth it if you're playing a lot of shivs. If you're not playing a lot of shivs, meh. The only deck this really works in is this weird shiv poison combo deck where you want to play a ton of shivs, rack up some poison for extra damage, and then play a catalyst or 2 to triple that poison. But those are some high bars to set. So it wants to be a poison card, but it also wants to be a shiv card, and you already need to have both. If you take it, you can't guarantee you're going to see a catalyst. And if you take catalyst, you can't guarantee with a shiv deck, you probably won't see Envenom because it's a rare card. So if it costs 1 or it's already upgraded, fine. But otherwise, Envenom is going to go here in C tier. Escape Plan. Very good card. You can almost always take one of these. The only reason you wouldn't want to, kind of like Adrenaline. It's not as good as Adrenaline, but it's very solid. Because it replaces itself. Besides things like Time Eater, the Hex Master, there's really not many reasons to not have it. It replaces itself, costs 0, and if you draw a skill, you gain 3 block. Might not draw a skill, but you might. Gain 3 block. Cards like Choke, anything that really wants you to play more cards to get a benefit. Love this. And so yeah, most of the time, there's no reason not to take it. It's very solid. Eviscerate. This has since been buffed. It actually only costs 3 now and says deals 7 damage 3 times. And it costs 1 less for each card discarded this turn. This is a fantastic card. For the discard synergy decks, very solid. And it can go Eviscerate can go right here in A tier. Eviscerate is only takeable if you have a way to discard many cards. If you are making a discard deck and you're like, oh, I have an acrobatics and I have a survivor and that's it. Not gonna cut it. You need things like Consecrate. The acrobatics for the survivor helps, but what you really want with this is, where is it? I mean, stuff like Dagger Throw. If you have a couple of those, you can discard. Where is it? Oh wait, I think it's up here. Yeah, Calculated Gamble. If you have a Calculated Gamble and you calculated gamble into an Eviscerate, that's wonderful. You have a free deal 21 damage, more if you have Strength or any type of scaling. Fantastic damage. Even if you're playing this for 1 or 2, you're not that unhappy about that. You would ideally like to play it for 0, but I'm happy to play Eviscerate for 1 most of the time. Especially since by then that means I don't have any more cards to discard. If my deck is focused on discarding, that means I'm done anyways. Alright. Let's look at Expertise. Expertise is 1 energy, draw cards until you have 6 in your hand. It seems a lot better than it is on first read, I think. Because Expertise it lets you draw, but only if you've already played a bunch of cards. And by that time, are you really going to have the energy to play Expertise? You might, but are you going to have the energy to play the cards that you draw? Probably not. And it doesn't really benefit from things like Calculated Gamble or Storm of Steel to like get a big hand, because you already had a big hand before that. And then you have to play all those cards. I don't think there's many times where you're playing this where you can draw 5 or 6 or 4. And so for that, most of the time, I don't think it's enough draw. It's going to sit comfortably right here in C tier. Yeah, that's where it deserves to be. Finisher. Deals 6 damage for each attack played this turn. Fantastic Shiv card. Fantastic Shiv card. Can go right up there with Eviscerate. I think of Finisher as the Eviscerate version for the Shiv deck. Finisher and Eviscerate, I think, are very similar cards for different archetypes. Finisher will basically deal a ton of damage if you can spam a bunch of Shivs. Great, you have a bunch of Blade Dances, maybe a burst, you can play a ton of them, and then your Finisher is dealing 6 damage for each attack play this turn, which might be 9 or 10. That's 1 energy to deal 60 damage if you play 10 Shivs, which is not that difficult. And if you have the Shuriken Relic, whew, now that's busted. That's really good. Yeah. It's just good damage. Even if you can only play 2 or 3 Shivs, that's still, what, 21? Not 21, sorry, 18. If you play 3 Shivs, you can play 1 unupgraded Blade Dance, you can play 3 Shivs and then play this. Still 21 damage for 1 energy. Still good. Yeah. Deserves to be top of A tier. Not top of A tier, but A tier. Fletchets. Deal 4 damage for each skill in your hand. Silent is the skill character. It has more skills, or real focuses more on skills, whereas the Ironclad focuses on attacks, defect on powers, and the Watcher just does whatever it wants. So you would think this would be better than it is, but oftentimes you have to rely on drawing it with a lot of skills, and even then, it's not that much damage. Most of the time when I take a Fletchets, I have a lot of skills, and then I just get unlucky. I draw with my attacks. I don't know what it is. Maybe I'm just the unluckiest player in the world, but I never draw this with a full hand of skills. I think the most damage I've ever had this done is like 20, 25 when I had, or sorry, not 20. It was 20. Yeah. I had it randomly upgraded by an event. So I think it deals 6 damage for each card in your hand. And I had 5 skills in my hand. 30. That was the most I've ever done. And it's just for 1 energy, yeah, 30 damage for 1 energy is good, but that's like the peak of the card. And I don't see it. Have never seen it. And to be honest, I think it's actually a D tier card. I find that you will get more value out of Caltrops because Caltrops is something you can use against the heart, whereas Fletchettes doesn't really shine in any specific fight or anything. Now that I'm looking at, I'm also going to put, no, Endless Agony is not D tier. Endless Agony at least has damage potential early game. Fletchettes just doesn't. It just doesn't have damage potential. It scales with strength, but that means that it still requires you to get a ton of skills in your hand. It's just not often as doable as you might think. Flying Knee. Deal 8 damage next turn, gain 1 energy, costs 1. It's fine. It replaces itself next turn. But like I said, it's a do something next turn card. The defect has a very similar card to this called Charge Battery. It says gain 7 block next turn, gain 1 energy. I think that's much better as a defensive card than it is Flying Knee. Because I want to spend my energy on offense. I want to use the energy once I get a lot of it. I want to use that extra energy next turn for offense and play more conservatively this turn and get the benefit next turn. Whereas here, I'm playing offensively and then getting a benefit next turn. For maybe a defensive benefit if I'm attacking on a turn where they're buffing or debuffing. But I don't see it. There's better other damage commons. I think something like where is it? Gotta find it. I think Quick Slash is better to just deal 8 damage and draw another card next. I think something like Dagger Throw is better because it enables discard synergies. I think something like Slice is better because it just costs nothing this turn. And sure, it does less damage, but it costs nothing this turn. With the amount of draw the Silent has, this just really doesn't do it for me. And so Flying Knee's good. It's okay. Well, Flying Knee's better than a lot of these other cards. Let me think about this. Can go here. You know what? Concentrate doesn't really deserve to be in C tier. Concentrate can be in the bottom of B tier. It deserves better than that. Footwork. Gain 2 dexterity. Upgrade this as gain 3. It's not worth your time. It's a trap. This card is a trap. You're going to take it and you're going to be like, oh, I can play dexterity. And then you're going to draw it on a turn where they're attacking. You're like, oh, I want to block this turn. Let me play my footwork and then play my 2 defends and get +4 block. Yeah, but you could have blocked for more if you just played another defend. Oh, but it's going to scale across the entire fight. But I would rather just play defensive cards now. It doesn't do enough on the turn you play it. You're going to draw it. You're not going to have enough defense. And you're going to get screwed over by it. Take it if you want, just so you can prove yourself that I'm right. The footwork is not going to be worth it. If you're going to get Dex, the best way to get it, and even though these are relics, you can't really guarantee them, Oddly Smooth Stone and stuff like Kunai. If you have maybe 2 or 3 dodge and rolls, this is somewhat justifiable, but otherwise, footwork does not do enough. It does not do enough on the turn you play it, and the turn you play it, think about it, if you draw it in a hand where you don't have to defend, you'd rather just spend the energy on offense. And if you draw it in a hand where you have to defend, you'd rather spend that energy on blocking now. And for that, it's not worth it. It can go right here in C tier. Mm, yeah, I can go right there. Glass Knife. One of the other damage rares, along with Die Die Die, but Glass Knife is much better. Deal 8 damage twice, decrease the damage of this card by 2 this combat. Upgrade, it says deal 12 damage twice. Really, really needs that upgrade. Needs that upgrade. It's still solid without the upgrade, but the upgrade makes it so much better. Yeah, I'm going to be talking about the card exclusively with an upgrade because it is one of the highest priority upgrades on the Silent. It's so much damage. Deal 12 damage twice. That's 24 damage for 1 energy with no requirements, no stipulations. It just does what it says. If you draw it again, oh no, it only does 20 damage. Oh no. And you might think, oh, eventually it's going to be useless, but nothing's going to survive 1 or 2 Glass Knives plus your other cards. Nothing will survive that. Maybe a boss, but your boss, this shouldn't be your boss killer. This is a way to get through hallway fights and elites, even elites for free. It's just free damage. It's so much free damage. And for that, it's going all the way up here in A tier because it's that good. All right, Grand Finale. Really fun card. I've made it work maybe once. Can only be played if there are no cards in your draw pile. Deal 50 damage to all enemies. I'm going to admit I'm not good enough to play this card. I'm not good enough for this. I've done it once, and it was really lucky. It requires so much draw manipulation, so much focus. It's a high skill card. It's a really, really high skill card. But most of the time when you see a Grand Finale, you can't take it. I admit, there are ways to make it work, there are ways to make it decent. And for that, it's not in D tier. It can go in C tier. I'll put it above Footwork just because I hate Footwork. It's not even the worst card here, but because Footwork is so deceiving. I'll put it above Footwork. For me, I don't take this card even as much as other cards here in C tier. But I acknowledge that it can be good. I'm just not good enough. If you're new, I don't recommend it. You need a lot of draw manipulation, and if you don't account for things that pop up, you'd be paying attention. You can get fucked over by the time meter, no draw. You can get fucked over by ink bottle. There's a lot of things that can just mess up Grand Finale. And if you're not paying attention, you'll miss it. You'll miss that trigger. Very difficult card to play with. High skill. I'm not good enough for it. Heal Hook. Deal 5 damage if the enemy has weak, gain energy, and draw 1 card. It's really, really terrible if that enemy does not have weak, and they might not. If you have a ton of ways to apply weak, you could take it. But how often are you going to get all that weak all the time? Not as often as you'd like. You can't always take it. And it should probably go somewhere down here. Because if the enemy doesn't have weak, it's a dead card. You're not going to play it because 1 energy, 5 damage is not worth it. It replaces itself completely if they have weak. That's all it does. If they have weak, it says deal 5 damage, replace this card. Energy and draw-wise. Even if they have weak, the value isn't that strong, and if they don't, it's dead. For that, actually, I think it's a D tier card. I'm changing my mind. It's not even in C tier. It can't hold up. It doesn't have a use case like with a lot of these other cards up here. It's not an Act 1 damage card. Late game, it doesn't do anything for you. What does it do? 5 damage and replaces itself if they have weak. But what if they don't? Sure, you might say I'm applying weak all the time. It just doesn't do enough. Infinite Blades. Card that I really liked when I first saw it. Unfortunately, not that good. This is far worse than something like a Blade Dance. Because think about this. Actually, Infinite Blades should probably be in D tier, honestly. Caltrops is only up in C because it has a use case against the heart, if anyone's wondering. Otherwise, it would be in D tier. If you're not going for a heart run, Caltrops is D tier. Probably like here. Yeah, we'll put it here. But because of its usefulness against the heart, it could be okay. Infinite Blades says at the start of your turn, add a shiv to your hand. So first turn does nothing. Next turn, you get a shiv. Then another shiv next turn. Then another shiv. It takes a total 4 turns to get the value of one Blade Dance. Upgrading it just makes it innate. What does that do? Clog up your hand with a terrible card? Pick a Blade Dance over Infinite Blades any day. Because in 4 turns, if this thing somehow manages to produce more shivs than one Blade Dance, trust me, it will not be worth it, and you would have rather just played the Blade Dance, got that value all in one turn, triggered maybe your kunai or your shuriken, triggered your finisher. It's just not. It takes 4 turns to do what a common card does. It's not worth it. Leg Sweep. A very solid defensive card. Go here in the middle of B. Leg Sweep applies 2 weak, gain 11 block. Upgraded is 3 weak, 14 block, I believe. I think the block's number is 14. It has enough numerical value to justify adding it to your deck if you're low on block. If you're already blocking for a ton, this doesn't really do anything for you. If you're kind of struggling to block mid-act 2, it's a solid pickup. For 2, maybe 3 turns if it's upgraded. It's not something I would prioritize upgrading, but if you find that upgraded, it's better. It can make the enemy deal less damage, hinder with multi-attacks, and get a good number of block. It's a solid card. Malaise. Malaise is a card where I feel like the amount of strength you get from it, strength loss and weakening, is not worth the amount of energy that you're paying. It can be good in some specific fights, but most of the time, if they're doing big multi-attacks, it can work against the heart, but make sure not to strength down the heart on a turn where it's buffing, or some very bad things can happen. Don't do that. But most of the time, if you're trying to apply negative strength and weak with all of your remaining energy, if you want this to do a lot, you're going to want to spend a lot of energy on it, and that means you're not blocking for enough, and it's still going to be doing damage. I very much doubt this is going to make the enemy start doing 0 damage to you. It's still going to be doing damage. And it has some use cases in some very specific fights where it's good, but otherwise, meh. It can be good against the plant thing in Act 2. God, that plant thing in Act 2 it can be good against. And there's a couple other multi-attack fights, but not worth your time most of the time. But hey, if you find yourself having excess energy, you know, it should go in C tier. It's better than all of these other cards, but yeah, it doesn't hold up with these up here in B. All right, Masterful Stab. It's a early Act 1 take. You take this in Act 1. It deals solid damage, and if you're good enough, it can keep dealing that damage for 0 energy. Actually, like, it's better than Malaise, but it doesn't hold up with these cards up here. It really falls off late game because you will be taking damage late game, and as soon as it costs 1, it's like, you could still play it. Once it costs 2, you're never touching it again. If you take damage twice, it's bad. It can be good for that damage race in Act 1. Otherwise, it falls off pretty quick. Neutralize. I didn't even know we had the starting cards on here. Oh, we do. I didn't have those for the defect tier list, but... Alright, Neutralize. Solid card. Obviously, it's a starting card, and you're forced to have it, so it ranks a little differently. And so... it's not as good. Well, it's not something you're going to take, right? The only way to get another one of these is from the the Match and Keep event. There's one other way, I think. I don't know off the top of my head. Off the top of my head, not sure, but it's a good upgrade. You're forced to have it. And you know what? I'm actually not going to... I will rank it. It's a good upgrade early if there's nothing better. The upgrade says deal 4 damage, apply 2 weak for 0. You would never take another neutralize, but because you're forced to have it, it's fine. And it can sit atop a C above malaise because you're forced to have it. Now, if you had to look at this as would you take it above any of these other cards? Actually, that's how we will look at it. Would you take it above any of these other cards? Here. I'm actually going to move Flying Knee down below all three of these, actually. Yeah, there, okay. Nightmare. Choose a card. Next turn, add 3 copies of that card into your hand. Exhaust. It costs 3. You can do some fun things with Nightmare. Unfortunately, it often feels like overkill. It's too much. The most fun thing you can do with Nightmare, in my opinion, is take it and add 3 catalysts into your hand next turn and just apply so much poison it's not even funny. Just like 999, just infinite poison. You can go into the thousands, but yeah, just crazy. But it's overkill. Upgrade, it costs 2, better. But most of the time you can't do much else on the turn you play it, which is really unfortunate and really holds it back. There's some fun decks with it most of the time. It's clunky, and it doesn't actively help you win. It's just kind of funny, and you can do some cool things with it. Noxious Fumes. Very, very good poison card. Noxious Fumes can go... Noxious Fumes can go here in A tier. It's good just on the concept that your poison doesn't tick down anymore. Normally at the end of the turn, poison ticks down 1. Now it goes up. It still ticks down 1, but it goes up 1 instead, plus 1 net total. So your poison's not deteriorating. Very good for any fight with large amounts of enemies. Very good for enabling things like Bane. Very good for clearing artifacts off enemies. And for that, it's just solid poison application. Outmaneuver. Next turn, gain 2 energy. Upgraded says next turn, gain 3 energy. It's a next turn card. You can do some fun things with it. Unfortunately, it has to go at bottom of C tier. Silent doesn't have a lot of really bad cards, but there's some... I'm not a big fan of it. Personally, I know I have a friend who loves this card. He would die on a hill for it. I don't see it. I don't see the next turn gain 1 energy for having to draw the card. Doesn't help you do anything. It just sets you up for next turn. And on Silent, you want your first turn to be the big one where you need energy, because you have your starting relic, which gives you 2 extra cards in your first turn. And you can't get this benefit on your first turn. So if you're drawing a ton, maybe, but still, I don't know. I've picked it up occasionally when I've just had an excess overflow of energy. But even when you had an excess overflow of energy, then you're just getting more energy next turn, and it's bad. I am putting this in D tier, actually. This card, I'll call it worse than Infinite Blades, just because it actually, like, the only reason you would pick this up is if you have too much energy and you need something to spend it on. But then you're not solving the problem. You're not spending that extra energy on anything but more energy, which is what you don't need. So why? You know? Phantasmal Killer. Next turn, your attacks do double damage. This says it costs 2. That is not anymore. It costs 1. Fantastic card. Fantastic. Upgraded costs 0. If you get this thing to cost 0, that just means, oh, I see it, I play it. Even not costing 0, still works. Still a fantastic card. Next turn, your attacks deal double damage. It really enables any deck, except for like maybe a poison deck that's just trying to apply poison. Doesn't really enable that, but enables shivs, enables discard with stuff like eviscerate. I mean, it's nearly as good as it sounds like when you read it. It's a do something next turn card, but it does so much next turn that it's worth it. And even then, it's a do something next turn card that costs 1 and can cost 0. It's really good. Well, yeah, I can stay there. Piercing Whale. Piercing Whale is fantastic. S tier card. It's a common too. Actually, Phantasmal Killer gets to move up a ton. I don't know what I'm doing. Phantasmal Killer is better than that. Phantasmal Killer can go here. Yeah. Yeah, it's better than these cards. But Piercing Whale. Piercing Whale is so good. Against the multi-attacks from the heart, just don't Piercing Whale when it buffs. Piercing Whale can block for so much for 1 energy. So much. It's a block card, right? Anything that multi-attacks is suddenly hitting you for negligible amounts of damage, possibly 0. And just take one. You almost always want 1 Piercing Whale in every deck. Early, you might not want to take it, but even then, if I see a card reward and early and there's something that, and I don't see anything else I want, I'll still take a Piercing Whale early. Might not be the best early, but I want one eventually. Right? And early though, if you see this alongside another card that you want, don't sweat it. Just take the other card you want. You want one of these eventually. 2, I'm okay with 2. 3 is far too many, but 2 can be okay, but you don't have to take 2. But it can block for so much. Upgraded says lose 8. I don't feel like it needs that upgrade. The 8 isn't really that. 8 over 6 doesn't do feel like it does that much, but it is highly beneficial. Just trust me on this. Pick up a Piercing Whale or 2. Save your run. Poison Stab. Deal 6 damage, apply 3 poison. Very similar to Deadly Poison, although it's more upfront damage, so it's more damage now than it is later. Unfortunately, this does not scale with Catalyst as well as Deadly Poison does. And yeah, it's a little bit of mix of like regular damage and poison, which I would rather it just do one thing better. But unfortunately, then it'd be busted if it just said deal a ton of poison. But that's what Deadly Poison does. So, yeah. Upgrade says deal 8 damage, apply 4 poison. But you really wish it was... It wants to be a poison deck, but it's also saying that it prioritizes upfront damage over poison, which is a little contradictory. Still a good card. Still a fine poison card, though. Predator. Deal 15 damage, next turn draw 2 additional cards. Solid. The next turn draw 2 is great. The Silent loves drawing more cards. And the deal 15 damage this turn is fine. I wouldn't say it can go up bottom of B. I wouldn't say the 15 damage doesn't do as much this turn, but the next turn effect is good enough to where it's worth it. I've actually gotten this card a couple times with Necronomicon, which I've been lucky to do. I've been lucky to get. And if you don't know what Necronomicon does, it plays your first attack of the turn that costs 2 or more twice. And then this is really good. The next turn, draw 2, sets up your next turn so beautifully to do so many things. Trust me on this. If you find yourself with maybe 1 extra energy each turn, just take a Predator. It will help you out. Prepared. By itself, unupgraded, not very good, because you have to draw it to play it, right? So it says draw 1 card, discard 1. So you think, oh, I can find the card that I want and discard the one I don't want. Fine with discard synergies. If you have discard synergies, take it. But it really wants an upgrade because you have to draw it to play it. So if you hadn't had that prepared, you would have just drawn that card that you were going to draw with the prepared anyways. Upgraded says draw 2, discard 2. Much better. Really lets you get through your deck, shuffle through, pick out what you want, and helps you discard a lot of cards for things like Eviscerate. Almost a must-have for every discard deck. It actually should go. Yeah, it can go right there. Quick Slash. Deal 8 damage, draw 1 card. One of the 3-ish damage commons. I don't know. The damage commons, I like to think of them are... I mean, Blade Dance is better than all the other damage commons, and it is kind of a damage common. But it's a shiv thing. It kind of does its own thing. The three like mid damage commons that are all kind of together are Quick Slash, Flying Knee, and Dagger Throw. They do very similar things. Quick Slash says deal 8 damage, draw 1 card. It's fine. I mean, if you have a lot of energy, it replaces itself. It's solid. It can help you cycle through your deck. Anything that does that is good. Dagger Throw. Deal 9 damage, draw 1 card, discard 1 card. Does 1 more damage to discard. You might think, oh, it's worse than Quick Slash. No, it's much better. Because discard decks want to discard cards. There's a bunch of cards in the silent that like having discards. There's benefits you can get from discarding. And that will make Dagger Throw much better than Quick Slash. And it can go, you can put it right here. Yeah, it can be better than Bane. Reflex. If this card is discarded from your hand, draw 1 card. Upgraded. I believe this is actually, is this changed? Does it say draw 2 now? Or is it the upgrade? Hold on, I'm actually looking this up on my other. I want to get this right, hold on. Yeah, it now says draw 2 cards, base. And if you upgrade it, it says draw 3. I knew that looked wrong, okay. It feels much easier to, I feel like Reflex is a very solid card. Discard decks really love to have it. And it really lets discard decks cycle through all their cards. Almost a necessary card. If you're not discarding a lot, not good. But if you are, fantastic. I'm actually going to put it down a little bit because you can't always take this card. Yeah, if you're not discarding. Riddle with Holes. Meh. Deal 3 damage 5 times is just not... It's not that much for 2 energy. Deal 15 damage for 2 energy. Right? Think about Predator does 15 damage and draws 2 additional cards. If you have strength, it scales. But I think you can't take it enough for it to be worth it because you really, really need to be scaling strength. It can work well with like a shiv deck that wants to that has Shuriken, wants to gain strength, but something like Finisher just does Riddle with Holes better. And so Riddle with Holes having much less synergy, much less usefulness can go maybe here. Dash is better. A lot of attack's better. Yeah, that's where I can go. I can go right there. Setup. Put a card from your hand on top of your draw pile that costs 0 until played. To do something next turn, unless you can draw that next. If you can draw that next card this turn, it can be alright. It's gimmicky. I'm not a big fan. I've used it before to some success, but you need a lot of high cost cards in your deck for it to work. And sometimes you just draw this card without any of your other high cost cards, and it's like, well, why do I have this? So for that setup, requiring you to draw it with all your high cost cards feels meh. And so setup can go... Setup can go right here. Over with Holes. Skewer. Great card. Great single target damage. Fun trick with this. I know I've mentioned Shuriken and Kunai a lot, but they really are just some of the best relics to have with the silent. With shivs. If you play this for 0, it still costs as... And like Ornamental Fan too. Anything that wants you to play attacks, you can play this for 0 and still play the attack. Fantastic. It can go up here, top of B actually. Much, much better. Very good. It's just solid upfront damage. And if you have excess energy, you can just spend it. Great for triggering those relics that want you to play a lot of attacks, or play even just play cards. Very versatile card. Slice, 0 energy, deal 5 damage. It's fine. Better than Quick Slash, but If you have a lot of draw, something like calculated gamble, acrobatics, backflip, you're cycling through all your cards, you can't play them all. Having a slice is fine extra damage. If you have something that wants you to play attacks, relic, great. Slice will be there for you. Sneaky Strike has gotten buffed. Right here it says it deals 10, and if you've discarded a card this turn, gain 2. It costs 2. Deal 12. Sometimes you get in the situation with Sneaky Strike where you would draw into it with your discard cards, but you don't have the energy to play it. Unfortunate, but most of the time, this is just free damage. It's really nice. It's really, really nice. You discard one card, and I'm fine with taking 1, 2, maybe even 3 if I'm feeling a little risky. Sneaky Strikes. If you're drawing a ton of cards and discarding, you get your Sneaky Strikes. Oh, 12 damage free, 12 damage free. Fantastic card. Storm of Steel. Discard your hand, add 1 shiv for each card discarded. It doesn't cost 2 anymore, it costs 1, and it is still very mid. The fundamental problem with this card is that shivs deal less damage than strikes. And if you can discard your hand, early game, you get a Storm of Steel. You discard your hand, you play your strikes and defends, and then, let's say you have some strikes left. You have maybe 2 cards left in your hand alongside this, if it's your opening hand. Otherwise, you play 2 cards, and then you play your Storm of Steel. And then you get 8 extra damage. There are situations where it can be really good. If you have something like tough bandages to discard a ton of stuff, even then discard synergies don't work great because you're discarding your entire hand. This is not a card discard decks want to use because you can't get any of those other cards that get benefits for discarding things after you play this because it discards your entire hand. If you can get your shivs dealing a ton of damage, this is fine. But most of the time, early game especially, your strikes are dealing more damage than shivs. And it's solid. I'll put it at the top of C tier. I'll put it at the top card in C tier. But otherwise, it's not as worth it. No, Predator can stay. I was thinking about moving Predator. I don't know if Strike's in here. Sucker Punch. Deal 7 damage, apply 1 week. The classic Strike Plus. Really, really mid. Oh, Sucker Punch is another one of those damage commons I was talking about. I'm actually thinking about moving Predator, Quick Slash, and Sucker. Sucker Punch can stay at the bottom of B. It's fine. It applies weak. It's a strike plus. It does a little more than a strike. Good early game. Falls off a little bit late game. But it does what you want it to do. I'm actually going to move Predator up above Quick Slash. I don't have much more to say about Sucker Punch. It does what it says in the tin. It's fine. Survivor. A starting card. It's one of those cards where you wouldn't really pick it up unless you have maybe a ton of discard synergies. If it didn't discard a card, it would be worse because discard decks like their Survivor. It's a very good defensive card. This, alongside Neutralize, makes Silent a very defensive character to start with. And because of that, it is better than Neutralize. I will actually put this at top of C tier. You know, it's better than Sucker Punch, actually. Yeah, I'll take this. It's better than Quick Slash, better than Predator. It can be better than Slice. We'll put it there. Yep. Tactician. If this card is discarded from your hand, gain energy. I think of Tactician and Reflex, Reflex is the better one. Although they're very similar, they're going to go right next to each other. Upgrade, it says gain 2 energy. Yep, Tactician is just very simple. You discard it and then you can play more cards. If you're drawing a lot of cards with your discard, you want Tactician. If you have more energy but you're not drawing as many cards, you want Reflex. Having both is fine. Really just cards that if you're discarding, you take because it's better better to discard these than a card that does nothing upon discard. Terror. Apply 99 vulnerable exhaust. It just says do a ton more damage to one single target for a long time. It's good. It's not die good, but it's good. Yep. It can go bottom of A. So Terror really just says, I'm going to do 50% more damage to you for the rest of the combat. And hey, that's just solid numeric output for one energy. Sometimes you can't play your Terror because you need to block, but if you can upgrade your Terror to get it to cost 0, not the highest priority upgrade, but solid. Tools of the Trade. At the start of your turn, draw one card and discard one card. Upgraded costs 0, regular costs 1. This card is terrible. Because think about this. You play Tools of the Trade, right? You'd have to draw it. So if you hadn't drawn Tools of the Trade, the card that you draw next is gonna be the card that you would have drawn instead of Tools of the Trade. Next turn after that, you draw that card. So a turn after you play it, you're draw neutral. Then 2 turns after, you're draw positive. And all that to get +1 draw 2 turns later for an energy, it's not worth it. It's just not worth it. It can actually go below Infinite Blades. Yeah. If it costs 0, great, but not great. it's worse. If it costs 0, sure, you're not spending energy for it. Now, if you have something like Hovering Kite, or you have a ton of discard synergies, this can work. Right? Because if you have Hovering Kite, suddenly it's a free energy every turn. But most of the time, Tools of the Trade is such a noob trap that I'm putting it in D tier. If you have discard synergies, fine. It can go higher. Realistically, I should put it somewhere up here in C. But because I've seen so many people take this card and not have discard synergies, it's going in D tier. Because it's ruined so many beautiful, beautiful new players. And I hate it. Okay. Unload. Deal 14 damage, discard all non-attack cards in your hand. It's okay. You want to play it last? It's just one of those other front-loaded damage rares alongside Die and Glass Knife. However, this one's much worse. Discarding all non-attack cards in your hand. It can work with discard synergies, but it's just not a card that you really need. If you have Eviscerate, fine. But, I don't know. It's decent. It should probably go... It can go here. So middle of B tier. It discards cards. It can get your Eviscerate off. But there's other cards that do that better. If you see it, it's fine. I just haven't found a personal love for it. Sometimes it discards cards that you really don't want to discard. And you're like, dang, I need to play this now, but I don't want to discard that card. And then you have to play the other cards first. It's messy. Not a big fan, but I acknowledge it's solid. Well-Laid Plans. It does no longer cost 0. It costs 1 now. At the end of your turn, retain up to 1 card, which means keep it in your hand. This card is incredible. This card is fabulous. I don't think it's quite S tier, but it's top of A tier for sure. Retaining cards lets you hold them when you want to play them. Retain up to 2 cards if upgraded. And damn, that is good. That is very good. Being able to play cards on the perfect turn is just incredible. You can hold a Catalyst for next turn if you want to apply more poison before it goes off. You can hold your Eviscerate for the perfect turn, right? Retaining cards. If you can't play all your cards, you can just have more cards in your hand next turn. Who doesn't love that? It's so much value for 1 energy. Just trust me, pick one up. All right, Wraith Form. Let me just scroll this thing all the way up to S tier. You know, this is better than Catalyst. Wraith Form's the best card ever. Wraith Form says it costs 3 and says gain 2 intangible. At the end of your turn, lose 1 dexterity. People get freaked out by this, especially new players. But it protects you this turn. This turn it just says you're invulnerable. And next turn, it also says you're invulnerable. Kill. And then after that, if you think about it, the damage isn't coming until the end of the 3rd turn after you play it. So it says, after you play this, because it costs 3, you're probably not doing anything else the turn you play it. After you play this, you have 2 turns to play pure offense and kill a thing. If you can't kill that thing, you're bad. Your deck is bad. Maybe don't play it the first turn of a boss or a combat that you know is going to take a while. Yeah, then maybe you don't play it. Upgrade, it says gain 3 intangible. Fucking incredible. Now it says you get 3 turns to kill whatever you're looking at. 3. If you can't kill that thing in 3 turns, shame on you. Shame on your deck. This gives you so much. It can be, single-handedly, your block plan. If you get 2 of them, oh my gosh. It can be your block plan against the heart. It can be your block plan against anything. You can get Wraith Form and just say, great, don't have to get many other block cards now. If you get 2 of them, that's just, your block plan is done. It's incredible. Try it out. Pick up a Wraith Form. You might struggle with it a little bit, but just trust the science. It's busted. Best card than Silent. And yeah, that is the tier list. Alright, now is the fun part. Now is where I move everything around and get thumbnail bait. Okay. What are we going to put up in S tier? We got to move Adrenaline down, move Wraith Form down. Because, yeah, tier list is going to look like this. And what else can I put in S to make people mad? What else can I put? Let's put Concentrate up in S. Calculated Gamble. Nah, Calculated Gamble can go here. And let's just start moving things around randomly. There we go. Put Accuracy up in S tier, actually. Put Burst down here. Let's grab some terrible cards. Let's put 1,000 Cuts up in S tier. Why not? Put Catalyst here. Got to make it somewhat believable, too, but not really. Let's put Grand Finale can go in S tier. Let's actually put one of the base cards up here. Let's put Survivor up in A tier. Alchemize. Let's take Piercing Will out. Let's take Blur out. Let's move a couple cards down out of A tier. Make this look believable. Put Predator up in A tier. Move these cards down so we can have it look all symmetrical and beautiful. Let's actually just move a lot of cards down. What is it? That way the tier list can look more tier listy for no reason. That way it doesn't look all full completely, you know? There we go. That's a thumbnail. We'll put Wraith Form down here, actually. That'll piss someone off, hopefully. Alright. Thank you for watching. Have a good day.